Case study: Brice vs. Brown. Introduction. The 1984 case of Brice vs. Brown explored the legal responsibility for psychological harm arising from negligence. Miss Brice, a passenger in a car driven by her daughter, witnessed a collision caused by Mr. Brown's negligent driving. While Miss Brice herself suffered no physical injuries, she developed severe emotional distress, nervous shock upon witnessing her daughter's injuries. This lawsuit centered on whether Mr. Brown, the at-fault driver, could be held liable for the psychological trauma Miss Brice experienced. Legal issues. Brice vs. Brown raised three key legal issues in the context of negligence law. Duty of care. Traditionally, a duty of care exists between parties who could reasonably foresee harm to one another. In this case, the court needed to determine if Mr. Brown, by his negligent driving, owed a duty of care to avoid causing Miss Brice psychological harm, even though she wasn't directly involved in the collision. Nervous shock. Negligence claims traditionally focused on physical injuries. This case challenged the established boundaries by asking whether Mr. Brown could be held liable for the emotional distress caused to Miss Brice by witnessing the accident. Eggshell skull rule. Miss Brice had a PI existing mental health condition, hysterical personality disorder, that made her more susceptible to severe nervous shock. The legal question was whether this PI existing condition absolved Mr. Brown of responsibility for the full extent of her suffering. This concept is known as the eggshell skull rule. Legal reasoning. The court acknowledged the emerging legal recognition of nervous shock as a compensable psychiatric injury in negligence claims. They established that Mr. Brown owed a duty of care to avoid foreseeable harm to anyone within the zone of potential danger created by his negligent driving. Witnessing a close family member being injured in an accident was deemed foreseeable emotional distress. Furthermore, the court applied the eggshell skull rule. This legal principle states that a defendant takes the plaintiff as they find them with regards to PI existing conditions. Mr. Brown's negligence caused the accident, which in turn triggered Miss Brice's PI existing vulnerability, leading to severe nervous shock. Therefore, Mr. Brown was held liable for the full extent of her damages. Holding and significance. The court ruled in favor of Miss Brice. This case significantly impacted the legal treatment of nervous shock claims in negligence law. It established that witnessing a close family member being injured in a foreseeable accident could be a basis for a compensable claim. Additionally, the court's emphasis on the eggshell skull rule clarified that a defendant cannot escape liability for the full extent of the harm caused simply because the plaintiff was more susceptible due to a PI existing condition. Conclusion. Brice vs. Brown stands as a landmark case in expanding the scope of recoverable damages in negligence claims. It recognized nervous shock as a compensable injury and solidified the application of the eggshell skull rule. The case emphasizes that a defendant is liable for the full consequences of their negligence, even if the harm is exacerbated by a plaintiff's PI existing vulnerability. This principle continues to shape legal discussions around emotional distress and the extent of a defendant's responsibility in negligence cases. If you are a law student and looking for more case studies, visit our website www.mylawtutor.net.